Sup flappers, welcome to another video. So in this video, I have gotten a huge number of requests to explain exactly how Anemo works and how Swirl works. Now this is going to be a more rudimentary video designed for newer players or players who just haven't taken the time to familiarize themselves with this particular element and its interactions. So let's talk about it, break it apart today for everyone. So I hope by the end of this video, you probably won't be able to master this element and all its potentials, but understanding how it works and maybe to go away and start practicing this for yourselves in the game of Genshin Impact will help you definitely in the long run when it comes to taking advantage of one of the most powerful tools in the game. Now, my name is Erotic Walrus, make videos 7 days a week, stream twice a week, all here on YouTube. So if you enjoy Genshin Impact content, consider subscribing as that would help out the channel a great deal. So with that said, let's get right into the video. When we talk about Anemo reactions, there are two types. So we have multiplicative swirl reactions being vaporize and melt, and we have transformative swirl reactions being electrocharge, overload, and superconduct. Now this is not news to anybody. The main difference between these two is that multiplicative reactions such as vaporize and melt can crit, while transformative reactions, electrocharge, overload, and superconduct cannot crit. Instead, they scale off of character's level and elemental mastery. So with all that said, let's jump right into the Anemo reaction. So when we talk about this, it's important to understand the order of application. If you want to make the best use of Swirl, you need to understand this, because let's use an example. So you want to cause big damage with melt through a Swirl reaction. It's more effective to apply Cryo, then Swirl infuse Cryo with Anemo. So now you use Cryo on the field, then you use Anemo, and now your Anemo has been infused and has now become Cryo. Then you proc melt with Pyro at the end to get that 2 times multiplier. So how you would do this is, let's say you use a Cryo character such as Diona, Rosaria, Kaya, right, any Cryo character, and apply Cryo on the enemies. Then you can use someone such as Sucrose to swirl that Cryo with her burst skill. And finally switch to someone like Xiangling to use her Pyro Nado to proc constant melt. Since Sucro's burst skill is now Cryo infused with Cryo, it will automatically reapply Cryo on all the enemies swirled within it. So because Xiangling's Pyro will remove the initial Cryo application, that's why we need Sucrose's burst skill to reapply Cryo, so Xiangling's burst skill can reapply melt. And that in essence is the core concept of how you utilize Anemo reactions. It's really about what element should go first, and then you put Anemo. Now, this is a very standard scenario, and I just mentioned, but oftentimes you will find that enemies themselves already come with elements, such as the elemental slimes or abyss mages when they have their shield still on. So in this situation, you will find it incredibly hard to control which element the Anemo will be infused with, ultimately resulting in a situation of a random bullshit go where everything is just flying on screen and you have no idea what's actually going on. But the core concept still does not change. If you have an element on the field already, it just saves you the step of having to apply an element yourself. Now, the downside to this is you don't actually get to choose what element is going to be infused with then by your Anemo, right? Well, this is the beauty of Genshin Impact, especially for something like the Spiral Abyss. Once you know, oh, I'm fighting Electro Slimes on this floor, and you can now bring characters that can help you to deal with this problem. So for example, if you're dealing with Electro Slimes, you could use Sucrose, Kazuha, or even Venti to do an overload reaction. So you go in with Venti, you use the burst, and now you don't even need to set the field. You just go in with Venti, use a burst, then change to Xiangling and use Pyro Nado, and immediately you just have overload over and over again until the enemies are either dead or you get your burst back and you do it all over again. Now the biggest question I get asked a lot of the time is, what do the numbers mean and where do they even pop up from when we're doing swirl reactions? And that is a very good question. So for Anemo reactions, you can think of it like a game of tag. For every enemy who has been affected by an element, when they are tagged with Anemo afterwards, not only will they be taking the Anemo damage, they will also be taking Swirl from not only their on status effect, but also the status effect of all other enemies within the area hit by Anemo. And this is why it's so important to apply an elemental status to enemies prior to using Swirl. Now this is not even talking about using your burst skill. It's even your elemental skill can have a huge variance of damage whether you decided to apply an element onto your enemies or not prior to using your swirl. So for every enemy affected by an elemental status, the effect will be multiplied by the number of enemies hit by the swirl reaction. So for example, if 5 hilichurls are affected by pyro and you swirl the 5 of them, there will be a total instance of 25 pyro damage applied to the 5 hilichurls, because hilichurl 1 will be hit by its own instance of pyro swirl, but hilichurl 2, 3, 4, and 5 will also get hit by hilichurl 1's pyro swirl, and hilichurl 2 will get hit by its own pyro swirl, but hilichurl 1, 3, 4, and 5 will also get hit by hilichurl 2's pyro swirl, hence making it a giant hurricane of death as the element continuously bounces back and forth in between the enemies until the infusion runs out or the enemies die. This is where swirl gets really scary. When you add in reactions into the equation, things really flies off the railing and into the realm of insanity. I'm sure you have all seen screenshots of some insane amount of damage numbers on screen from swirl reactions. And while all Anemo characters are capable of feats of similar degree, there is one culprit who takes it one step above the rest. You see, when it comes to swirl, it's all depending on the duration of the skill and the number of swirl application the skill can apply during that duration. So for most Anemo characters, they are limited to 1 to 2 applications per elemental skill and much more during their burst skill. So for Sucrose, she has an energy cost of 80 and her burst lasts for 6 seconds, but for Kazuha and Venti, they have a burst that lasts 8 seconds and only a cost of 60. So let's look at the difference between Kazuha and Venti when it comes to their burst skill. While both have great coverage and application, Venti's burst has more ticks and has one added benefit to it, and that is that it groups the enemies in a tight area. Remember what I've mentioned before in that within the infused area, the enemies tag each other with the element they have applied to them. So what ends up happening during Venti's burst skill is that all enemies are constantly tagging each other while also taking reaction damage, as well as being reapplied with a new element. This is all on top of additional on-field elemental damage being thrown towards them, such as in this case Ganyu's burst skill or Xiangling's burst skill. In this case, it would be Ganyu's burst skill, which is on a whole other instance of broken, and especially in the case with Venti, I feel disgusting just thinking about this interaction. So with all that said, we still have one last thing to tack on, and that is the 4-piece Viridescent. Now this set is absolutely cracked out when it comes to Anemo characters. I don't think there's another set in the game that can match the effectiveness of this set for Anemo characters. And to put it simply, it's just a debuff that is applied on the enemies with the Viridescent 4-piece to have them take more damage from the infused element. So let's say, back to the example, you use Kaya to apply Cryo and you swirl that Cryo with your Anemo character, and now your Anemo character skill is infused with Cryo, and if your Anemo character has 4-piece Viridescent, the enemies within that swirl reaction is going to have their Cryo resistances reduced by 60%. That's essentially how it is. So you guys see how insane this is. If you guys understand the proper method of application, trust me, Anemo will be one of the best ways for you to power through this game, especially with the elemental mastery buffs. It's very easy to get a lot of power with very little invested. So go ahead, try this for yourselves. I hope this has helped you guys, and if you have any more questions, leave it in the comments below and I'll see if I can get to them one by one. Until next time, everybody, I urge you all to stay safe and peace.